Welcome to the Grit Behind the Grind podcast, where we dive deep into raw, unfiltered journey of entrepreneurship, fitness, mental health, and building businesses from the ground up. I'm Annika Rowell, co-founder of Grit and Grind Coffee, real estate developer, fitness enthusiast, dad, and husband.
And I'm Destiney Rowell, co-founder of Grit and Grind Coffee, creative, brand strategist, and above all, mom and wife, bringing you real talk on what it takes to thrive as a business owner, especially when you're doing it alongside your partner. Here, we don't just focus on the wins. We dig deep into the struggles, the sacrifices, and the daily grind that it takes to make it all possible. So tune in, subscribe, and get ready to uncover the grit behind the grind. Welcome back to the Grit Behind the Grind, where we dive into stories behind bold entrepreneurs, game-changing ideas, and the journeys that turn passion into success. Today, we're sitting down with Annika, the powerhouse behind Prickly Pear Coffee Co. What started as a mobile coffee cart grew into 2 thriving brick-and-mortar locations, all thanks to Annika's strategic vision, business savvy, and her dedication to building community-driven brands. I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. I've secretly socially stalked you for probably the past few years. And this is kind of my little fangirl moment. My dreams have come true. Thank you so much, Annika, for just taking the time to sit down with us and hopefully just breathe a little bit of creativity and business into someone else along the road. That's what we're all here for.
Oh my goodness,
so
thank you for having me.
Much.
Such an honor. I love all of your content too, for what it's worth. I've definitely returned the favor by social media stalking you.
I think we all do. And I think I have some of my best of friends. We just support each other, and we've never even really met in person. But when we do, it's never skipped a beat. It's we've been friends our entire life. And I think that's really cool. And it says a lot about this industry in general. I mean, coffee people, I say, are the coolest people. It's we all share this one common love for community and serving. And we're all a tribe built into one. So
yeah, I always talk about people are always oh, so you must love coffee, and I'm yes, I do, but I think it's more so the ceremonious nature of coffee. I just want to hold my cup, or go on a walk with a friend and have a coffee, or sit with a friend at coffee. It almost is there's so much more that centers around it. It's not just coffee.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So let's dive in. So your story proves that starting small doesn't necessarily mean thinking small. So tell us a little bit of your backstory, even if it's just a little cliff note, where we started, maybe a year or two, because it's really neat to put into context. A lot of people see this big old beautiful store, but they don't realize that all this stuff can be tangible really quickly if you have a strategic plan, pricing, all the things. So tell us
I love this. So we are celebrating 5 years of Prickly Pear Coffee Co. in April, which is thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's even today I've been thinking of we got to do something. We're going to have a little party. Yeah, and it's wild that it's been 5 years. So I started this business at 18 as a senior in high school. I was working as a barista at a cafe in my hometown, and when COVID hit, I was there's so many details I could go into, but long story short, when COVID hit, I wanted to do something creative and was man, I have all this time on my hands. I'm going to play around and really get into coffee. I bought a little Breville espresso machine that a lot of people now have in their homes, and a folding table. And I would make coffee for my friends in my living room. I would make coffee all over, and it started turning into hey, can you do this at my graduation party? Can you do this at my wedding? And I'm oh my goodness. So this was all the summer of 2020. I was planning to move to Belmont to attend school in the fall, and at this point I was man, I'm actually making some money with my little Breville and my folding table. So I brought it all down to Nashville with me, started reaching out to local boutiques here in Nashville of just, can I make coffee for your people that are shopping? Just another fun hands-on experience. Boutique owners loved it because it was another thing they could offer on a Saturday morning while you're already in the store shopping. And it just kept snowballing from there. We graduated from the folding table and the Breville to a higher end espresso machine and a coffee cart. And eventually the coffee cart graduated into 2 storefronts, which is still really wild to me. If you would have told that 18-year-old hey, this is where you're going to be in 5 years, I don't think I would have believed it. But I also think that that's such a testament to like right place and right time. I couldn't have dreamt that up at that time. I didn't know what I was going to learn, what I was going to fail at, how many times I would want to quit, because that's super real too. I don't want to ever act like it's all rainbows and unicorns. I was telling someone yesterday, I quit and I rehired myself today,
Oh yeah, I do that all the time. My husband and I work from home and we have like two separate offices, and it's not odd that I don't go in there. I'm like, where do I put in my 2 week notice? I want to burn it all down. And this is coming from someone who's like we have other people that we need to support in other locations. And it's like, it never fails. You always feel that, but it's that moment of like perseverance or pretty much grit that you have to kind of dig deep, and you're like, okay, put your big girl panties on. We were made for this, and the good outweighs the bad. And as an owner, you can relate. There's so many. Most of our time is not making coffee. It's putting out fires, solving problems for other people. And that could be a pretty dark place from time to time. But man, whenever we are on that mountain peak, or whenever you get to see the opportunities that you get to give to other baristas or young women, it makes everything so worth it. I'm glad that you mentioned that there was fear. And of course, there's always big risk. So whenever you made that leap from just being a little mobile cart to the brick and mortar, what was one of your biggest fears that you kind of had in the back of your head?
What was one of my biggest? I guess the first one is classic, is like nobody's gonna come, which is not. I mean, it's not silly. Like, I don't want to invalidate that, because that is a super real fear. And obviously, if you don't have customers, you don't have the rest of your business. But it also is silly in the sense that the same God that gave you the business plan and the same God that gave you the opportunity is going to give you the customers, And so a lot of that is just like almost this selfish, worldly fear of, well, maybe there's not going to be enough people that come. Okay, then we work on that. And that's marketing and business strategy and, not necessarily the most realistic fear that we can't solve for, I guess.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful too. We started very similar, small, mobile in a little town, and now we have multiple locations. But you do fear no one's going to come. But when you get that one person that pulls you aside and they look like their world just crushed and they have their coffee, and really, did they come for the coffee, or did they come for that community, or just a moment to see a little bit of hope, or pull you aside and say, hey, can you just think of me? Some people will say, can you pray for me? But it's really neat to have that moment. And for a second, you're like, I don't care if another person comes today. I am here, and I've done every single thing up until this point for this one person. And it helps you stay aligned on those slow days, or whenever it's polar opposite and you're crazy busy and you need to slow down and just be in the moment and not just ignore someone. I always say, one good day don't make you, one bad day don't break you. And it's so hard to see that, especially as, we have to be conscious of numbers. And of course, if we don't make X amount, we can't stay open. But like you said, we did not go through all of this for God to just be like, nope, we're done.
I also think there's also this really healthy medium of like, maybe you are done at some point. And I think as a culture, we like have such this twisted view of what failure is. Because if I decided tomorrow that I'm like, you know what, I'm actually quitting and I'm not rehiring myself, and I'm just feeling like this is the end of the chapter, like that's not failure either. And so I think that is also really encouraging of like, man, chase the business dream, chase the idea, because failure, there is no failure when you're trying, when you put yourself out there, when you take that leap of faith. I literally don't believe in failure. I believe in pivoting, of, hey,
that's my word of the year. My word of the year is pivot. And I didn't realize it was until the
maybe
last
that's my
4
word
weeks,
too.
But I was like,
maybe that should be my word too. Yeah, there's no...
But it's so
there's
true.
just pivoting, and when you pivot, you're learning, you're strategizing, you're like all these good things that build grit, that build resilience, that build your expertise. But I mean, failing just means not showing up,
Yeah, and I feel so wholeheartedly that we have a tendency as creatives to put our identity in specific titles
Preaching
and things.
To the choir, girl.
I know. I know.
Literally,
We're done,
literally.
mic drop. But it's so hard to become a mobile coffee cart owner and then to open two locations, brick and mortar. You are no longer an owner at that
Mm,
point. You are a leader. And so it's very hard to change that identity whenever we're wired so hard
yeah.
into something. I experienced that, like you said, maybe it is the end of a chapter. Our goal when we opened our little mobile coffee cart or coffee trailer was to have this big, beautiful downtown shop. We got that. And then my husband was like, there's no way we can grow, grind to what it's supposed to be if you are trying to be a
Mm,
coffee shop owner
yeah.
at this one location. And so that was an identity crisis that I had. And for me, I was like, well, does this mean closing this door is a failure? But no, it wasn't. It was again changing my perspective,
Hmm.
unwiring my identity to something that I did create, but also passing the baton to someone who is way more fit to be a coffee shop owner
Mm,
than I ever was. Like, I really feel like I am an opportunity creator. Like, I'm
I
just
love
a
that.
catalyst, for God to a vessel. And so, me being stuck behind the bar, even in a shop, there's no way we could have done what we've done in a short period of time if I would have
Yeah.
just stuck to that identity. And it's crazy how we get so tied to identities.
Yeah.
It's
And I think
insane.
even just I mean, you could go the whole route too of like work-life balance with this being your identity, you know? I have a
Mm,
hard time with that of, even like for the weekend,
hmm
there is not a single day where business is not a thought in my brain, you know? And so then it's hard to
hmm
make that differentiation of like, well, I'm Annika and that's Prickly, and they're not synonymous. And also for Prickly's
hmm
aspect of it, of like, man, that place needs to be able to run without Annika, And so also in your identity and
Absolutely.
becoming a leader of, well, what does it look like to delegate and hand off some of that? And it's not that I don't have equipped employees. I mean, they're amazing. I could not do it without them. But half the time it's that I just like haven't let go. I've been white knuckling things that I don't need to be white knuckling because it's so much my identity, or I've been doing it by myself for 5 years. And now there's someone who wants to help. I'm like, I don't even know how to let you help? That's where I think that's where
No.
my word could be pivoting
So,
is this year of like allowing and equipping people to step into higher places. And then almost this also identity crisis of like, well, if I'm not doing that, what does that mean for me? What is my new role?
what
Exactly,
do I do with my
exactly.
hands? Yeah. Yeah. And at that point, it goes back to square A where we started. It's just
Yeah,
trusting in God. And He will use every single skill and talent that you've learned thus far to
totally.
equip you for the next chapter. What I look back now, I helped teach graphic design a few years when I was having like a little midlife crisis. And I stepped into teaching the year COVID
The
hit.
worst.
And I was like, hey, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, I've never taught before, and they give me like 30 high schoolers to teach them graphic art. I'm like, what in the world? Well, we went to virtual learning. Now I look back, and that's
Mm,
literally what I do is I build courses to teach people virtually how
I
to
love it.
run and open a coffee shop. I'm like,
Totally.
God, you know what you're doing. Even when we're like, what in the
Totally. Oh my
world are
gosh,
you
it's so good.
doing? What was one of the first things that you were, if someone's struggling and they're like, okay, I
Hmm.
hear you, delegate something. What's one of the smallest things or one of the first things that you were able to
I
delegate?
think like you talked about, I think the biggest thing for me that wasn't that serious but felt big was like literally hiring someone to be in the shop. Because when I first took this leap of faith, I was
Hmm
leaving a stint in corporate America and had 40 hours a week to replace it. And so it was me working in the shop that whole time, which I loved, and it was great. And it was great for, building the brand, getting to know our clients, etc. But then for us to grow, the next step was like, okay, I'm going to hire someone and she's going to be here and I'm going to trust that she's going to talk to the regulars and she's going to uphold to our standards in the way that I think that's a big thing too of like, well,
hmm
that's how I make the coffee. And I know that I make coffee really well. You know what I mean? Like just your
Yep.
standards of coffee. So the smallest place to start that wasn't really small was even just hiring staff to come and make coffee. And then from there, you
hmm
learn and you grow and get better at your hiring process and your training process. And how am I going to teach you to make coffee as if Annika is making coffee?
hmm And you don't realize how hard it is to write out an
Oh my
SOP or
gosh.
instructions on how to do something,
I
especially
just
when
do
you're
it.
just like, I just do
Yes.
it.
And
I
it
don't know
like
how
in
to
my
do it.
head, it's just common sense. Like, what, what do you mean I have to, like, I don't know how to explain this to you. Yeah, totally. Totally.
Just watch and do it. But that is the first step, is practicing how to write
Mm,
down instructions.
that's
I
good.
remember writing down my first SOP on how to dial in the espresso machine. And poor man, Mackenzie, that was my first high school hire. She's like, you missed like half the steps. I was like,
Literally,
then
literally.
fix it. I don't even know. Like, I didn't know how to write them. So you think that that's, it does sound small, like hiring someone, but understanding, okay, now that I hire someone,
Yeah,
how do I teach them? How do I create these systems and processes so they can duplicate consistency? Because now you're on May third location, you have to
totally.
be consistent, especially if you're in a small, in the same area. I don't want to go to Prickly Pear and get, a coffee
Totally.
one way and then go to the next one
Yeah,
over
and
next
that's
town
like
over.
a
So it's
priority
so,
of
so
this year
crucial.
of, okay, we know that there will be more stores in the future, but what does it look like right now to like hone in our craft and master consistency? Because we're a team of 10 now. And so there's so much room for everyone to be doing something
Wow.
differently. So how do we minimize that? And how do I, as a leader, I love that you said that, like get good at leading well to minimize the inconsistencies.
Mhm.
And that's hard.
Yeah. Oh, it's extremely hard. So before the last 4 weeks, before I
Love it.
pivoted my word to pivot, my word of the
Mm,
year was smooth. And it was in context to the saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. We say that a
mm,
lot in our shops because it gets crazy, but consistency. But even in our business, like we wanted to grow 20 locations this year, which is super ambitious. But there was things that we look back on and we're like, man, these things aren't
mm,
fine tuned enough. Like I know I'm a perfectionist, and there's a point where you're like, you just got to build a
totally.
plane as you're flying. But there's red flags that you're like, if this isn't consistent between locations across states, like think about if we did grow
Yeah.
20 locations, it would probably
Yeah.
bite us in the butt. So this year we step back and it's going slower because it's gonna pay off in the long run to be
Yeah, I'm trying
smoother.
to think what my dad always says, as what does he say? As slow,
Yep.
as fast as possible, but as slow as necessary. So, like you're moving in the
That's a
sense
good
that
one.
we're not just dragging our feet. I think that can be very common, especially like in certain industries, things just take forever to move along, right? And so we're moving as fast
Hmm.
as possible because we're keeping the ball moving, but we're moving as slow as necessary so that we can fine tune, exactly like you said.
Yeah. So, starting as a mobile coffee business and running Prickly Pear, what was something that you wish
Mm,
people understood, but they really don't understand about growing a business from ground up?
that is a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll let you
Okay.
ponder on it for
I'm
a
gonna
second.
just give you the very first thing that comes to mind. Is the obvious answer is that it takes work. The obvious answer is that you're going to be grinding. This is not a 40-hour work week. This is like an 100-hour work week, even just in your thought life. Like you're spending 20 hours thinking about it. Um, I think the biggest thing though in that is being okay with it in the sense that your priorities are going to look different than your peers. I think that is something I had to learn the very hard way because I was 18 when I started. And so by the time we really were snowballing and growing, all of my peers were in college and they were going out and doing this and doing that. And that's great on a Friday night, but my Friday night was like sitting on the floor doing inventory because I had an event early Saturday morning. And there were so many times where I'm like, man, like, why can't I just be a normal 21-year-old? And it's like, well, first of all, there's no normal. My path just looks a little different. And so I think being okay with the fact that your priorities are going to look different than those around you. Um, and which is the classic cliche of like, we're all on our own path. And that's very true. But I think there is some sort of sense of I have to go with the status quo, and when you choose to be an entrepreneur in any capacity in any industry, you are absolutely going against the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a firm believer that the road less traveled by is always going to be
Mm,
10 times harder. But I told someone the other day, I was like,
no.
college is not for everyone, but entrepreneurship is not for everyone either. And I feel like a lot of people in this industry It looks
Yeah,
so unicorns and
totally.
rainbows. Like, oh, you get to serve coffee, you get to make people happy. And I was like, we've got to do a better job about
I mean,
showing the
even
not so
like I
happy stuff
majored in
because
entrepreneurship. I have a degree in entrepreneurship, and even studying it for 4 years can't prepare you for what it's actually like, which is norm. I
mm-mm,
mean, that's like anything, right? Like you're learning about it, but until your boots on
anything,
the
yeah.
ground, you don't know what that looks like. But I do think it's funny. It's like you're taking all of these accounting classes and this, that, and the other, and you're like, man, like this feels
Mm-hmm.
kind of crunchy. Like I don't like this, but it's still 10 times better than when you're actually in it. And now it's like, oh, the actual numbers, like people's livelihood and salaries depend on it. And you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
there's so much tied to every single decision you make. So not only is it not always rainbows and unicorns, but there's a lot of responsibility, and wisdom and discernment are like pure gold when you're an entrepreneur, because I can
Mm-hmm.
make wrong choices at every single step that impact so many people.
Yeah, I never realized when we got into it how, like you said, responsive all the responsibility
Mm,
onto other people, like the responsibility that you really have on your shoulders, not just for the people, your
yeah.
customers, but for your employees or the people surrounded by you, or
Yeah.
even the community that you serve in. And that's a big weight. Not you have to have a lot of piece of who you are.
Which
And
goes
I did
back
not
to
realize that. And I'm
your
so great.
your identity, right? Of like, man, this my
Yes.
responsibility when Annika is at Prickly Pear is this. How do I come home and separate Annika and Prickly Pear and still be just Annika? And to be honest with you, if you were to ask me how I do that, I don't know that I'd have an answer for you right now. I think that's something that I'm actively working on.
Whenever I hear someone say, "Oh my gosh, I really want work-life balance." I'm like here to tell you I've been doing it since I was 15. There's no like balance where it's like
No.
50-50. The balance is being able to kind
Mm,
of be a chameleon. And I have to be a mom some days. And some days I'm like, Brayden, I can't pick you up from football or I won't be able to be at that game. Just know,
yeah.
I want to be there. And it's having to be a business owner or show up for other people. And that's
Yeah, and
the work life balance. It's being
it's
able to
I love
switch
that.
it.
I love the chameleon. I always say like it's not a healthy work life balance, it's healthy work life blend.
Hmm.
You know, of just like the
Yep.
appropriate
Yep.
blending and appropriate time and spaces and I mean, it's still boundaries, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. So a lot of our audience typically is first time,
Amazing.
entrepreneurs or just getting into the mobile coffee game. And they really just find our resources to try and figure out where they
I
want to
love
go
it.
or how to start. What's a common challenge? And I think you help other first time entrepreneurs or first
Yeah,
time
yeah.
startups as well. Awesome. And so, I mean, there comes a point, and the reason that we do it is because there was such a lack of information
Totally.
and a gap in the industry when we started. I was like, I will not let any if I can help it, I will not let
No,
anyone have to
yeah.
go through what
Yeah.
I
I'm
went
like, I
through.
remember coming
And
across your
and
resources
that
and being
that
like,
was
where was this 5 years ago? Why did I know about this?
right. Yeah, I know, definitely a game changer and life hack. But what is a common challenge that you see on your end, new entrepreneurs?
Mm,
What are they facing?
okay. One of the big roadblockers, I think, to even getting started is thinking that you need to have all this money to start. Like people are always like, "Oh, well, I need." Even last night, I was on a walk with a friend, and she was talking about franchising something, and she's like, "I don't even know, like, where would you get the money to do that?" And we just like aren't really educated ever as a society about how to finance things. I mean, this goes back to I feel so strongly of like in
Mhm.
high school, why was I learning I don't know, trigonometry when I should be learning like my taxes and like how to actually let money work for you and not be a slave to your money and, this, that, and the other. Could go down a whole rabbit
Yep.
hole. But I think a lot of challenges when I'm consulting with new entrepreneurs is like lack of knowledge that cash might be a lot more accessible than you think, that there are so many resources. Granted, you want to do it well, you want to be wise about it, but I don't think it's as big of a barrier as people believe it is.
Yeah, money's a weird thing that
Yeah.
a lot of people don't like to talk about. Numbers, that was one of the biggest things when we were just interested because we
Mm,
were very analytical. We came into it from a very left brain aspect and just ran numbers. I was like, there is nothing out here. You had to like literally like call up coffee shops and just hope and pray they
yeah.
would, sit down and talk with you. Money's just a weird thing that people don't
Which we
like to
need
talk
to,
about. And so
I mean, I get that. I totally get that. It's uncomfortable. It's
yeah.
something that, like, it's not that money makes me uncomfortable, but it stresses me out just because we run on money. Um, but I think exactly what you said
Hmm.
of like, you created this course that people didn't have to go through what you went through. A big part of that is the money aspect. Like, we need to be willing to share
Hmm.
that if we're truly going to be collaborative and encouraging and empowering people.
Yeah, because that's the first thing that I mean, it was amazing that you said you're celebrating your 5 years because most small businesses, I say small, but
No.
they don't last that long, especially when you bootstrap
Yeah.
it from 18 years old. That's pretty wild. You're
Yeah.
learning a lot really quick. And so that's the number one thing though that I see is people they just overextend themselves because they don't believe in
Mm,
starting small.
it's good.
And then what happens whenever you have this big loan or debt is you are not confident in who you are, your brand, and you just
True.
listen to anybody who comes in and say, "Oh, you should add this to your menu," or you start discounting, and then all of a sudden it's just a downhill. But whenever you start small and you allow yourself to grow, it allows you to also build your confidence because now you can't tell me to add anything to. I don't care if 100 people came through my drive-through and told me to add matcha. I might not do. We do have matcha, but I'm just saying,
Right.
I might not want to just because I don't have to. You're not listening, and you're able to make those sound decisions and stay true to your brand. Because at the end of the day, when you have multiple locations, or when you have, even in my instance, when
Mm,
I have other owners where they do follow grit and grind,
their own
but
personality.
we all
Totally.
have our own. Yeah, and so you want to be able for them to be expressive, but at the same time, we want to be the
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A of coffee. Like I want your experience to be the same in Alabama
Right.
as it is in Utah. And the only way to do that is to be able to make sure that we're consistent and that we don't have all of these people, coming into our ear saying we
I
should
love
add
that. I
something.
love
But I think
the
start
branding note. I think that's really good. Yeah, like I said, I think, financing is a big roadblocker, but that's a good I think that's a good one to add a challenge from the get-go is if you don't have your branding and your brand identity, you're gonna be all over the place to the point where it's not sustainable. You can grow in your lane, but you got to stay in your
yeah.
lane.
Yes, yeah, and you're tugging on my heart because my core, my real job used to be brand strategy and
I see
marketing,
that
and
for you.
so
That makes so much sense. I love that.
before I even knew how to pull coffee or make coffee, I knew my ideal customer. I knew their avatar. I named her
Yeah.
like all the colors, like it was all this. That's what I love about it, but it is pretty much my why. So whenever I want to veer off, I'm like, would my ideal customer be okay with that on the menu? Or what would my ideal customer think of sitting in that kind of texture
Interesting.
couch inside my coffee shop? Like it's the weirdest things. Or would my ideal customer be okay with that artwork on the wall? Like but it's a north. It's like a, what's it called? Like a
Yeah, yeah,
compass,
yeah.
like a true
Totally.
north. That's what it is.
I love that. That's great.
And so I believe
I need to
branding.
come up with I've done it before, obviously, for business plans and whatnot and thinking about the demographic, but I like that idea
Hmm.
of you're like little invisible friend, and that's who you're running your ideas by.
Yep. Some people name their
Does yours have a name?
avatars and everything. Mine does not have a name, but we started doing like some educational stuff, and
Okay,
her name
cute.
was Savannah. Like ChatGPT came up with her. Her name's Savannah, and she lives in Texas, and she's 38 years old, and that's like my ideal avatar for like education and And it's so funny because we have the mobile coffee entrepreneur group. Most of them are women, and if you go to like our engagement
Yes.
algorithm, it gives you the ages. I'm like, are you serious?
I
It's
love
so
that.
on
That's so
point. And
awesome.
so it's it's kind of scary, but I'm like, all right,
So good.
Savannah,
It's
we
so
got
good.
this. Well, I won't keep you much longer. This was an amazing conversation that I think so many people are going to be able to just pull a lot of good nuggets from, especially with your experience. And then, just elaborating on how you started small is so important. I see so many people in the group They're like, what espresso machine to buy? I'm like, no. You start off with a
Yep.
table with cold brew. Like, I have the math calculations of how much
Yep.
cold brew you can sell in like 3
So
months to
good.
buy your
Yeah.
espresso machine. And I'm like, you don't
Yep.
they don't get it. They have this vision of what they see what we have now, but don't
Another
understand how
great
it
example, and I
started.
know that you know them, but another great example of this is the Nitro Bar out of Rhode Island. I mean, you know,
Yes.
Audrey's amazing. She tells her story about maxing out credit cards and starting as the cold brew cart. But I think that is another great poster child story of small beginnings that you're able to then learn and grow at every single time, in every single stage of it, to be where you are now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to insert that song, Start It From the Bottom.
Literally, yes. And then you and I can revisit this
Right.
conversation in 10 years. And it was like, man, like two stores at Prickly
Stop.
was starting from the bottom, and who knows, or maybe not, because it's also okay to decide that this is just for a season, you know, depends.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So what are some future plans for Prickly Pear Coffee Co? Any exciting things coming up? I seen that you did that,
Oh my gosh,
that conference. That was pretty cool.
conference
The
was-
Galentine. Like, that
The
space is
conference
amazing.
was so amazing, and really fun, because it was kind of an out of the box, like, why would a coffee shop do this? But it was right up our alley of, you know, it's more than a cup of coffee. It's about community. So kind of that same idea, like I said, of
Yeah.
staying in your lane, but growing in your lane. We will do more community events like that. Absolutely. We are talking about third locations, but they will not be as soon as you think, just because this year we are focusing on the SOPs and honing in the craft.
Okay.
So we definitely are geared towards growth. It just might be a little minute. In the immediate, what's the word? Immediate future, I guess, is even just like maximizing our space in the current coffee shops. We're gonna do a little bit of moving furniture around, like as simple as that. But I think that it's gonna be able to give us more storage, more prep room, more things on the menu, etc. Our Gulch location specifically, there's a lot of construction. There's a lot of new businesses joining us in the Gulch, which is really fun. We're excited to have new customers that are,
exciting.
you know, coming to see them and coming to join us. And then we'll celebrate 5 years in April and kind of have a party to celebrate, bringing in all sorts of Nashville business owners and industry people. So I think, yeah, this year is honing in on our craft and focusing on the community aspect so that it stays with a mission of more than just a cup of coffee.
I absolutely love that. So if any of the listeners
Yes.
want to follow you, where can they find you?
Yes,
Follow
I love
your
it.
story.
We are on Instagram and TikTok at Prickly Pear Coffee Co.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank
you.
you so much. And stay tuned. We're going to have tons of other entrepreneurs come on and just explain their story. And really, it goes back to the basis of just turning passion into a success. But I think the key to it is building a community-driven
So
brand.
good.
It just seems to be the common denominator with a lot of successful stories that I've seen. So, all right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Remember, no grit, no pearl.